What's going on YouTube? It's Savvy Sabs and I'm back with another video. Alright guys, so today I want to talk to you about the difference between living in Boston and living in NYC. So this is a question people have asked me a couple of times throughout the years, like living here in Boston, and I figured it'd just be so much easier just to do a video about it. A lot of people think they're the same or they're similar, but they're really not the same. So I'm just gonna do a little chit chat with you and tell you about the differences of living in Boston versus living in New York City. Before we get started, please don't forget to hit like and subscribe below, and I'll be right back. What is the difference between living in Boston and living in New York? So let me just start with New York first, and I'm gonna tell you the pros and the cons, and then I'll jump over to Boston. So like, having lived in both, when I think about the pros about living in New York, like, number one, like the culture. Any type of culture that you were looking for, they got it. If you looking for a Dominican festival, you looking for a Greek festival, you looking for, like, you know, they have like Spanish Harlem, they have like, you know, Italian neighborhoods, which have kind of been like gentrified now, but any type of culture that you're looking for, they have it. Every culture is represented in New York City, I will say that. And to go along with that, I'd say number two would be food, because that's another thing that goes with the culture. Like, any type of food that you want in New York, you can find it. Whether you looking for like jerk chicken, you looking for falafel, you looking for, like, you know, real Italian food, you looking for like the best, you know, pizza, like, hands down you can find it in New York. I will give you that, whether you get it off the street or whether you get it in an actual building, restaurant, whatever. They got the best food. They have the best pizza. And I've had pizza at a lot of different places because I like pizza. I do. But there's no pizza like the pizza I've had in New York City. Like, it is amazing. Quick shout out to the Forest Pizza in Brooklyn. That is my favorite place to get pizza at in New York. I used to live down the street. That's over there in Brooklyn by the avenues in Midwood. Telling you, hands down, best pizza. What's another pro? You know, transportation. Like, this is one thing I will say, like, New York has a subway, a real subway that runs 24 hours a day. No matter where you need to go in New York, you can get there by public transportation. Now, you may have to make some connections here and there. You may have to jump on one train to another train to a bus, but you can get there. And that is why a lot of people in New York don't have a car. You don't need one. Even if you want to get to Staten Island, you could just jump on the ferry. So that is one thing I will say, like, that subway system in New York, like, they got that down. You hear me? Like, whoever designed that, they got that down. So that's a big plus. And that's also part of the reason why New Yorkers don't really stay in their homes or stay in their apartments. Like, when I lived in New York, I was rarely at home. I went home to sleep and to shower. Most of the time I was out and about during the day because anywhere I needed to go, I could get there. I didn't have to look for a parking spot. I mean, some people have cars in New York, but I didn't have to, you know, do that. Just hop on the train. So definitely the public transportation is like a big thing. Another pro I would say are just like socially, any type of event or whatever you're looking to do, they'll have it. They'll have it in New York City. Whether it's a festival, whether you want to go to a sports game, whether you want to go to concerts, whatever you're looking to do, like, socially, it's amazing. The nightlife to go along with that is pretty good. It has changed over the years. When I lived there, places used to stay open really, really late. When I went back to visit New York like a year ago, places were closing like 2 o'clock in the morning, which was surprising to me because I remember places being open really late. So that's the thing. If you looking to like, you know, go out and about, if you're looking to like dance, go out dancing and go into like nightclubs and stuff like that, like the nightlife there is really good, even though some of the times have changed with things closing a little bit earlier, but the nightlife is good. But what are some cons? Oh, I got one more pro. Sorry, forgot to mention this one. The people. So this is a touch and go one right here, okay? So like, I would say if you're coming from a place like the South and you move to New York City, the people might come across as very mean to you, right? But if I'm comparing New York City to Boston, I would say, yeah, you know, people in New York can be kind of mean sometimes, but I think the biggest difference is that socially, I found it easier to make friends in New York City. Maybe that's because there's so many transplants there, I don't know, but I did not have difficulty making friends there. People were more willing to let me into like their friend circle. You know what I'm saying? But I'll get to that on Boston in a minute. Cons. New York is expensive. Okay. New York is expensive. I'm talking New York is so expensive that like the housing is so expensive there to the point where I didn't know anybody when I lived in New York that had their own apartment. Not one person. I'm talking people who were like, you know, had corporate jobs. Even those people had roommates. Because the rent is so high, it's just so expensive to live there. So, you know, cost of living, not too good, you know, especially if you're like in your 20s, because you're not making as much anyway most of the time if you're entry level. So definitely that was like, oof, it's expensive. It's really expensive. Number 2, the pest control. Look, the pests are a big problem in New York City. The rodent infestation is bad. I feel like it's gotten worse and worse over the years. Like, it's just bad. No matter where you go, you see them. I've gone out to eat in restaurants before and I've seen them just run right across the floor and I'm like, what? Like, no. That is a problem. And even in places like in really expensive like neighborhoods, expensive like apartments and stuff like that, I've still known people who lived in those neighborhoods and they still had those same problems. They had roaches, they had like mice like really bad and stuff like that. So my whole thing is like, that one that's something you have to get used to if you want to live there, because it's really bad there. Like, every time you go to the subways, you see them. Like I told you, I've seen them in restaurants. Like, you have to get past that. Another con. In the summertime, it is not a good place to be. That heat in New York City in the summer is unbearable. You hear me? Most of the places, like most of the apartments and stuff, don't have central air conditioning. So you need to have like an AC unit. And then if you're still taking public transportation and you go down in the subways, it is brutally hot in the subway in New York City in the summertime. That kind of heat will knock you out. My husband and I went back to visit, like I said, like a year ago, and it was during the summer. I don't know what I was thinking, and it was really hot. It was like high 90s. And the city pretty much clears out at that point. A lot of people leave. They'll go to the Hamptons, they go to other beaches and stuff just to get out of that city heat. So you do kind of have the city to yourself at that point. But I'm telling you, it was so hot at one point, we were like, look, we're not taking the subway. We're just gonna Uber everywhere. That's how hot it is. It'll knock you out. People have fainted in the subway in New York in the summertime. People have fainted on the platforms. That's how hot it is in the summer. Can't deal with that summer heat. What else? Another con. The hustle. So one thing I noticed about living in New York, everybody that I knew had a hustle. It didn't matter if they had like a full-time job, didn't matter if they had a professional full-time job. Everyone I knew was doing something else on the side. Now, some people might see that as a pro, but for me, I saw that as a con, because I'm one of those people, like, I like to, work a full-time job and have that be my full-time job. But in New York, so many people have something else they're doing on the side, whether it's they work 9 to 5 Monday through Friday, and then at night on the weekends, they're waiting tables at a restaurant, or they're bartending. Everybody has something else they were doing on the side, and it's just like, people don't really sleep. People are constantly on the go, and I think when you're younger, that's exciting and that's attractive. But as you get older, you get tired of that daily hustle and bustle. Like, people don't really relax. The grind, the hustle, for me, I just think it's a bit much, especially like as you get older. You just want to just have a full-time job, and that's it, and be able to live comfortably. But because it's so expensive, that's part of the reason why people have this issue. That's New York. Now I'm gonna go on to Boston. The pros about Boston, and you're gonna see the difference here now. So the food is good here too. That's just it. Like, the food is really, really good here too, especially if you like seafood, if you like clam chowder, you like, cod, any type of fish, like lobster, that kind of stuff. And the pizza's decent here too. It's not New York level, but the pizza's still good here too. But the food is really good here. And again, like New York, there's a lot of cultures here. Now, I will say it's not going to be the same type of cultures that you see in New York. New York tends to have more of I tend to see more of like a Caribbean population. Like, there's more, like when they have a carnival there in New York, like, it's a big, big deal. And they have that here too, but it's not as big. You know what I'm saying? Like, so you will see different cultures. Like, here, it wasn't until I moved here, it was the first time I met someone who was Cape Verdean. I'd never met someone who was from Cape Verde before. There's more Brazilian population here, more Portuguese population here. So you do have a lot of different cultures here, but it'll be different than what you experience living in New York City, if that makes sense. So the food and the culture, that's still, very good. And I'm just gonna say, when it comes to housing here, I will say I think that is somewhat of a pro for Boston compared to New York City, because Boston is expensive as well, but the difference is here, like, I can work a full-time job, and my husband and I can work full-time jobs, and we don't have roommates. You know what I mean? Like, we have a 2-bedroom. Whereas like in New York, I could never have that. I could never, not making what I make now, even making more than what I make now, I couldn't have that. I couldn't have 2-bedroom. I don't even know if I'd have a 1-bedroom in New York, to be honest with you. Me and the hubs might be shacked up in a studio if we were living in New York. I'm just being honest. But here, you do get more for your money when it comes to the housing. So that is actually a plus when I'm thinking about it in comparison to New York. Another pro is education. There are a lot of highly educated people here. And if you are one of those people, you like college, and you want to meet people who are like-minded like you, Boston is the place to be. Because we have some of the top colleges here. Massachusetts has the #1 public school system in the country. Like, if you want to meet like highly educated people, I mean, just going to dinner and just like having intellectual conversations with people like on the regular, this is the place to be. I will say that is one thing I do like about Boston, the fact that you can have those conversations so often with people here. It is very big on education. Another pro. Cool thing about living here is that because of Boston's proximity to places, you can go to different states in like that. So like, for example, if I want to go to Portland, Maine, that's just a 2-hour drive. I can also go to Cape Cod. I can go to the beach. That's like 2.5 hours, depending on where you go to the Cape. But I can also go to Providence, Rhode Island, and that's like an hour. I can go up to Vermont, and that's like 3 hours. So Boston's physical location is great for just taking a weekend road trip. Just like, I'm just gonna go here, I'm just gonna go there. You know what I mean? Whereas like living in New York, if I wanted to take a road trip, first of all, it's probably gonna take me like an hour just to get out of the city because of the traffic. And we got traffic here too. But where you gonna go? But besides like the Hamptons, where are you going? I think that's the difference. Like here I could just go, boom, Maine, Vermont, Rhode Island, even Connecticut. Just shoot right down to Connecticut. Go see some peeps. Go to Mystic, try that Mystic pizza. Stuff like that. So that is one of the great things, is its proximity. Another pro. There are a lot of transplants here. Some people see that as a negative. I see it as a positive. And I'm gonna tell you why. When I first moved here, I thought I was not gonna meet many people who were coming from other states like me. I was definitely wrong. I've met people here who have moved here from California, Ohio, Florida, Texas. Texas is a big one for some reason. North Carolina, South Carolina, like, Chicago. Like, I've met people from all over who have moved here. There are a lot of transplants here. And the way that I met them was through meetup.com. I do a lot of like groups and stuff and activities through Meetup in Boston, which is also really huge here. And that helped me meet like a lot of people and stuff. But having so many transplants here is great because you get to meet other people who, like you, like, they don't know the Boston lingo. They don't know, all these things and stuff like that. So you're kind of learning those things together. So that's a good thing. And it gives you diversity too. You're not just surrounded around people who think like you and act like you. You're meeting people from all these different places that have different experiences. So that's a pro, I think. But now I gotta go to the cons. So also, like New York, Boston is expensive. I'm just gonna be real. I know I said the thing about the housing, but it is expensive. This is not a place that you can move to and not have a job. And I've seen people do that, and I've seen them go back home. You need to have a job. You need to pay rent. Some landlords are gonna want 3 months up front. You need to be able to eat, all that kind of stuff. So this is not a cheap place to live. So that is one con. It just is what it is. And as they keep building more condos in the city, it gets more and more expensive. So, but that's a whole nother video. Gentrification, that's another one. So another con, public transportation. So for New York, that was a pro, right? The reason why it's a con for Boston is because our subway system, which is actually called the MBTA, which we call the T, is not 24/7. It does not run all day. It stops at, I think the last ride is at 12:45 p.m. or 12:45, maybe 1 o'clock in the morning, but it does not run all day, which means if you work third shift, you're screwed. You got to find another way to get to work. You're going to have a car. It's not really reliable either. Like, there's been plenty of times where I've been late to work because the bus didn't show, the train didn't show, a train got stuck at Harvard. They always get stuck at Harvard. So there's those things too, but everybody here, I think, would tell you the number one con for them, or the biggest con for them, is the public transportation. Everybody here hate the T. It just is what it is. And because of that, that leads me to another con, is the traffic. Now, I've been living here for almost 9 years. It'll be 9 years September. The traffic has consistently become worse and worse and worse over the years that I've lived here. And the reason is because the public transportation is so bad. So people who live in spots where there is like a T stop next to them and they would normally take the T, these people are choosing to drive to work and just pay for the parking. So what happens is you have all these people coming into this one little area, and they're coming from Connecticut, Rhode Island, they're coming from New Hampshire. Yeah, people in New Hampshire work in Boston. So they're coming from all these different places, and the interstate, the roads on I-93 and the Mass Pike and 95 are not big enough to accommodate all the people coming in on their cars or in their cars. It has become crazy, crazy, crazy worse. Hold on, y'all. I think that's my husband. Hey, babe.
Hey.
Come on in. I'm just gonna pause this and continue what I was, or maybe I'm not gonna pause it. Okay. That's my husband. Anyway, no, the traffic has gotten consistently worse over the years, I would say. Hold on, I have to pause this, you guys. I forgot about the water. Sorry about that. But yeah, so that part is correct. Another con. I talked about the people in New York. I'll mention the people in Boston. So again, like if you're coming from a place like the South and you come here, you might be like, oh, people are mean here, people are cold, like da-da-da, that kind of stuff. And again, like I wouldn't necessarily say that people are like mean, you know, but if you're looking for like that Southern hospitality that you're gonna get like in the South, like no, you're not gonna, you know, find that here unless you are talking to people that are from the South too, that maybe just like moved here. But one thing I will say, I think one of the differences is between like Boston and New York when it comes to the people is that, like I said, I did find it easier to make friends when I lived in New York. I felt like they were more willing to let you into their friend circle. Whereas I do feel like in Boston, like if it were not for groups like meetup.com, I think it may have been a lot more challenging for me to make friends here, because in Meetup, those people are going to those events because they want to meet people, they want to make friends, they want to, you know, get out of their comfort zone. Whereas just doing my everyday day-to-day, it didn't happen organically. Maybe that's the best word for it. If you're looking to make friends here and you're looking for it to happen organically, that might be difficult for you, because people do tend to stay to their own, and then it kind of depends on what neighborhood you live in. This is changing a lot because of gentrification, but like when I first got here, Boston was not as gentrified as it is now. So you didn't have as many transplants that lived in like Dorchester and like, you know, Roxbury, and like Jamaica Plain has become more like gentrified now and stuff like that. These are just some of the neighborhoods like in Boston. So it wasn't the way it is now. So like when I first moved here, I did feel like people were a little bit more standoffish, whereas like if you weren't from that neighborhood, they weren't really trying to mess with you like that, if that makes sense. But I do think that has gotten better because, and partially maybe because of gentrification, but that is something I will say. In fact, when I first moved here, one of my roommates told me, she said, I'm just gonna give you a heads up, it takes about 2 years to make a friend here. And I totally was like, she's way exaggerating, that's no way. But again, like I said, I had an easier time because of meetup.com. I met my husband in a meetup group in Boston. So I think I had an easier time because of that. Had it not been for meetup.com, I think I would have had a more difficult path, because it wasn't the type of environment where people were like, oh, let's go out for drinks after work. Like that didn't even happen. That didn't happen for like a while. like a while. And again, it just takes people longer here to get used to you, because they're not used to people staying here. They're used to people come in, they'll go to school, they may get a job for a little bit, and then they leave and go somewhere else. They're not used to people moving here to stay here. So that's something just to take into consideration. One con that is not really a con to me, but I do hear it from a lot of other people, is the weather. Now, snow doesn't bother me. Like, you know, I'd rather see snow than see rain. So when we have snowstorms, that doesn't bother me the way it bothers a lot of people here, to be honest with you. The summertime here is great. It does get a little humid sometimes, but the summers here are beautiful, and there's always so much going on, like in the city and stuff like that, especially in the summer. But a lot of people they can't take the winters here, and that's one of the reasons why some people don't stay, because they're just like, I don't want to deal with snow, it's too cold, you know, da da da. And I'm just like, you move to a cold place, you move to New England, what were you expecting it to be like, you know? That's just my take on it. I don't know. But that's just kind of how like I look at it. So for me, the weather's not a big deal, but you will hear that a lot from some people who live here. And I think that's pretty much it. So the reason why I wanted to do that comparison is because I hear comparisons between Boston and New York City a lot, and they're different cities. They're not the same. New York is huge, like freaking huge, and Boston is more of the same population size as like DC. But Boston is a little bit more dense than DC, if that makes sense. But they're really not as much the same. But when it comes to preferences and actually living somewhere, I prefer living here versus living in New York City, because I just feel like my actual lifestyle here is more comfortable. I have more what is it called? Disposable income, like living here. Whereas when I lived in New York, I was always in tight spaces. I felt cramped, and your money doesn't go as far, like all that kinds of stuff. So yeah, those are my comparisons between the two. And another pro I forgot is like, there's less crime here. Duh, I almost figured that there's less crime here than there is in New York. Like, crime happens here, but it's not like it, you know, like I can walk from the T-stop by myself at night, and for the most part, I'll be fine. But like in New York, I know their crime rate has gone down over the years, but we just have less crime. There's less like stranger crime, like the chances of someone punching you in the face just because here, that doesn't happen often. So yeah. All right, guys, that's all I have for you today. I know that was a long conversation, and I can go on even longer, but I don't want to keep you glued for that long. But yeah, I hope you like what you saw. Now you know the difference between living in Boston and living in New York, the pros and cons. And if any of you have lived in both those cities, like, tell me your take on it too. Put your comments below, and I look forward to hearing from you. So bye.